This is The Naked Patient, Beyond the Operating Room. Listen as Dr. Nicholas Howland talks with real patients about their real experiences with plastic surgery.
Hey, this is the Naked Patient Podcast. I'm Dr. Nicholas Howland. I am here today with one of my very special guests, Miss Bryndee Carlson. Mrs. Bryndee Carlson. Mrs. Bryndee. Somewhat new. And you are my sister.
Yep.
Technically stepsister, but we don't use those labels.
That's right. That's right. We don't use that.
No, you're just my family.
We're just family. We're a big, giant Brady Bunch family is how I would say.
Oh my gosh. So people have heard me. You tell the people what the family is.
What the family is? Yeah. I mean, I guess going back.
Yeah.
Your mom married my dad.
Yes.
So my dad inherited 6 more kids.
Yes.
So as a total, we have 10 kids.
Yes.
But we kind of grew up together, I would say. So I think we just kind of blended really easily.
Yeah, we actually grew up down the street from each other.
Yeah, 10 houses down.
Which was great. We had how old was I when your parents got divorced?
So
we're about the same age. So I guess how old were you?
So you're a year older than me. I was 6 when my parents divorced.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so you had been 7 or 8?
Yeah. Okay, so there was another 10 years before my parents got divorced, and then, even another 6-7 years before our parents got married.
Yeah, because my dad was single for 14 years, but always had a crush on your mom. Which
how could you not? My mom's Laura's the cutest.
Well, I would agree with that, but we were trying to push it for a very long time to get them together, and I also think that Tyler and you were also trying to push it on your side, right?
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
So the kids were trying to get the parents together, essentially, but that didn't happen for several years.
It took a little bit. It took a little bit of coaxing, and then they realized that it was real. So Randy is your dad, and just kind of, I guess, so people understand more as they're listening to us.
Like, who is this?
Who is this? So Randy's my stepdad, and he was scout leader and a young men's leader for us growing up. You guys were always kind of in and out of our church activities. I was really close with your brother Brody, who's now my brother Brody. Yep. We would play Nintendo together growing up. He would always kick my ass.
Fair.
At Nintendo, not in
real life.
Not physically in real life. So, family aside, everybody's like, okay, great, cool family story. The reason I wanted to bring you on, Bryndee, is a couple reasons. Because you keep asking me all day, like, why are you bringing me on? I'm so boring.
I do. I am a boring person, so I don't get it.
So this whole show is, the reason I started this podcast is I want people to understand kind of the human side of plastic surgery. How it changes lives, how it doesn't change lives. But what I've quickly realized is that's going to get real boring real fast. It's important. It's going to be a big part of the show, but it's really just kind of, because I want to take the shame out of plastic surgery and all of that, but I really want to have people on that have unique stories. And we'll make kind of plastic surgery and a very adjacent thing to that. But I think you have, at least in my mind, a pretty unique story.
Well, you could call it unique, yes.
Okay, so you are newly married.
Yes.
How newly married?
So technically, I got married twice. I got married in November for the first time just for paperwork. Okay. I am married to a foreigner. And you might as well have, put us on 90-day fiancé because we had a 90-day limit to seal the deal. So I got married for the first time legally in November and then had an official wedding in January.
Okay. And John is from?
So John is originally from New Zealand, but he has been living in Australia for the last 10 years. So he's both Aussie, Kiwi.
How did you guys meet? Don't say when you met. I want that to be like the big reveal. Tell us how you guys
How long
met.
did you meet before you sealed the deal in 90 days? That's a good question. I will hold that. So I mean, I'm trying to think how I can I mean, I don't even know how to say that without saying how.
Yeah, you guys met online, right?
Oh, just how we met. Okay, so yeah, so we did. We met online. It's actually a very interesting story. I can go into that a little bit just to kind of give a little bit of context, because I was very anti-dating online. And I am a little bit older, and everybody was kind of moving to the dating world, saying the only way to meet somebody was online. I was very anti, because I wanted to meet somebody very traditional, in a traditional way, whether it be a coffee shop, a bar, whatever it is. It just sounded a lot cooler than me saying the story is I met online.
Yeah. How old were you at the time?
So at the time I was 36.
Okay.
And at the beginning of that year, I was hanging out with a few friends for New Year's. And we were all about the same age, mid to late 30s, and we were all single. And it was all one of those things where it was like, okay, is this how we want to be? Because I was actually very happy being single. Mm. I loved it, actually. I live in New York City. I have a career. I have a good social life. I didn't feel like I needed anybody. Yep. I didn't feel like I needed to go that way.
No, you did life the right way. Like, this is when people ask me about my sister Bryndee, I'm like, oh, listen to this. This is Bryndee did life the right way. Because growing up in Utah, like, still being single at 36 is an anomaly.
Oh, every time I came to Utah, I was like the weirdo.
Exactly. I mean, everybody expects you to be married super young, because you've got to start having a family super young. And now this is the way I tell the story. You're going to have to correct me where I'm wrong, or not, because I just brag. And it's Bryndee went through college, got a finance degree, went and did an internship in New York with a hedge fund, I believe, and then stayed on with that same hedge fund. And has an incredible career with this hedge fund, where she's able to travel all over, gets a fat Christmas bonus, and did life the right way. And meanwhile, while I'm observing you having this beautiful life, I'm wasting away my 20s in med school and residency. Poor as shit. And to be fair, I'm grateful for those years, but I gave away those years in exchange for something else. And I was always not jealous, but very, very envious and very proud of you as my sister. You nailed it.
Oh, that's so sweet. I mean, looking at it in hindsight, it's always so interesting, because I never wanted to get married in my 20s. I never even thought about it. I had other goals and aspirations of being this big shot person in New York City and traveling the world, which is where my focus and priorities always were. So, I just think that you do life a little bit different. And for you went to med school and you got all that. And now you get to travel and do all of that fun stuff. And now I'm sitting here and, spoiler alert, pregnant and not able to travel. But at the same time, I did a lot of that in my 20s, so I got a lot of that out of my system before I kind of moved on to that next phase of life.
Yeah. Every time you give me crap for going somewhere, I'm still catching up to you.
I know, except for you're catching up really quickly.
So fast forward, you're 36, single, loving life in New York.
So 36, loving life. I really honestly had I never got online. I just had no desire to do that. I dated a little bit here and there, but again, it wasn't like a huge priority, because I had such a good social circle. And
is the online scene in New York like typical of what is here, like Tinder, Bumble, Hinge? That's what people do?
Yeah. So they had like these, like the League was one of them that's, very pretentious and crazy, but what you'll find is everybody's on every app. So it's like pick one and you're going to probably get the same pool of people.
Yeah.
But New York is very catered to online dating, because everybody's got a career, everybody's got a really crazy schedule. So it's not like you're really going to meet somebody outside of, which I would assume is the same as in Utah. Like your schedules just don't work.
Your schedule's crazy. I would say the one difference that I could foresee, maybe this is true, maybe it's not, is Salt Lake especially is so small. I mean, everybody. Like I came here in 2017, I had just broken up with a girl, and was like, well, I was very hesitant about getting online, because I plastic surgeon, online dating. I didn't want to be swiping left and right on my patients.
Fair.
And so, but I'm like, I'm new. Like, let's check it out. And I did, and it was, I think the first 3 girls I went on a date with, you meet them on the app, and then you get onto some other social media platform, right? Like Instagram or Facebook. And so you start chatting them on there. And that's like the intermediary between getting their actual phone number.
Well, it's like the stalking part, right?
Yes, like exactly. Like, who are they friends with? How do you like outside
of the 6 pictures that you choose that are your most favorite? Now I can kind of filter through the rest of your life.
Exactly. I can see your real pictures. Literally the first 3 people was like, also knows X person. And it was a colleague of mine who I knew was also single, who I knew was also dating these people. And I'm like, every freaking girl I go out with is going to be Eskimo brothers with this guy. And it was, Salt Lake City is very small. Where I imagine New York, you probably at least don't know everybody here.
I would say that's fair. Yes. It's definitely going to be a little bit bigger circles there. You're not going to probably find your friends of friends there, which makes it a little bit easier. But at the same time, you probably breed more crazies too, because if you're a friend of a friend, sometimes you can call them and say, hey, is this person a crazy person? Uh-huh. And, that's something that I had to do with John, who's my husband now, is we actually did have a mutual friend, which is crazy.
We're going to get there. Which we'll get there. I want to swap craziest online dating story. This wasn't on my agenda today, but since we're talking about it.
So I actually consider myself pretty lucky because I meet up with friends now and I hear the craziest stories ever. Mm-hmm. But I would probably say the craziest thing I ran into is, and I think the pandemic probably stemmed some of this, which I think is a good thing. But the first date's not bad if you do like a FaceTime, pre-screen.
Okay.
Before you go out.
Okay.
Because let's be honest, if you go out to a bar, which is actually the worst dating, in my opinion. So everybody will tell me going out for a drink is the best thing because you go for one drink and then you leave. Well, when you're trained like me, who's a professional in investor relations that just talks to people all day long, and you dive into their life, that one drink turns into 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
And if one person drinks faster than the other, then you're obviously, off.
Yeah.
And then how do you catch up from there? And then the date's 4 hours. So I actually think drink is the worst first date.
What was your go-to date?
So what I was getting back to is the FaceTime is a good screening because then you can kind of screen that out. Then you've got other distractions. You can easily be like, hey, gotta go. And then you don't have to leave the comfort of your house. But my favorite first time, if you're going to meet somebody, would be a coffee date.
Okay.
Because nobody's going to have more than one coffee.
No.
So once your coffee's done, and it's always in a portable cup, so you can leave at any point in time. So in my personal opinion, a drink date is not the right way to go because that could be an endless, night.
That's fair. I was doing it wrong.
I don't know. Everybody tells me that I have it wrong and that I needed to be more bold in saying I needed to leave, but I always felt like it was awkward if they had half a drink to go.
My go-to was chips and salsa and margarita. This is when I was in Texas, and there's chips and salsa margarita are everywhere. But because in my mind, if it goes south and it's terrible, worst case scenario, I got chips and salsa and a margarita. And
win-win.
Yeah, your day's never bad if you have chips and salsa and a margarita.
So I always said that about dinners. Because they're like, I never want to go to a dinner. And I was like, I got to eat. So I might as well, if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody, I've still got my dinner.
Yeah.
So I didn't think it was that bad. Plus, eventually checks got to come. And that's a very easy way to be like, okay, got to go. So I've always been against drink dates, but I've always been for coffee dates and dinner dates.
Love it.
So anyway, you wanted to know about, the craziest.
Yes, tell me your craziest.
Because I would love to hear your craziest. But the craziest person I've ever been out with, well, I never went out with him. I screened him in a FaceTime. Mm-hmm. So basically what had happened was he became uber obsessed after like 10 minutes of a conversation and started texting me like over and over and over. Well, I was busy and didn't answer my phone for, a couple hours. I had actually like gone out with another friend. And by the time I looked at my phone, I had over 25 text messages, and they started very sweet, like, oh, can't wait to meet you and all this stuff. And by the end it was, I thought you were cooler than this.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I can't believe that you would ditch me. And I was like, oh, wow. After 2 hours of not responding, this crazy person is like, done a 180. And then he proceeded to then comment how ugly I was. Okay. And so automatically it went from, you're so pretty, to, oh my gosh, you're the worst person in the world.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, thank goodness I screen dated this before I actually met this crazy person in person. So that was probably the craziest situation. But I was actually pretty lucky with online dating in the sense that I met some pretty decent people.
Good. I mean, most people, I think, at their heart are decent people, but there's some unhealthy behaviors out there and some unhealthy people. My craziest, I guess I have a couple. One, very topical, because Manti Te'o's Netflix special just came out where he got catfished.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but it's on the list. It's
phenomenal. And you will feel for him. You'll have a deeper connection with him. And I got catfished so many times. Like people that are like, oh my gosh, how could Manti let this happen to him? It is so easy. And it's a scale though, right? So nobody puts up their best, like their worst picture. So everybody lies a little bit, right? So you would show up for a date and it's always an age thing or a weight thing. Or, these were photos that were taken 2 years ago, and
it's the best of the best. You gotta show your
best. I totally get that. So I completely understand that. So I was never upset or turned off by any of that. And all of those, by the way, are very mild forms of catfishing. Just saying. So I show up once for chips and salsa margarita. That's how I do. And I'm sitting in the booth, and this girl comes and sits across from me and says, hey, I'm so-and-so. This girl I'm supposed to meet. And I look at her, I'm like, I'm going to be right back. I just got to go to the restroom. I go sit in the restroom, and this is not an age thing. It's not a weight thing. This girl wasn't even the same race as the pictures that were posted on her profile. And every time I tell this story, people are like, okay, so you just left, right? I'm like, no, went and had chips and salsa margarita.
You needed your chips and salsa. I mean,
like,
win-win.
And they're like, well, you called her out on it, right? Nope. Just had a nice conversation with her, talked to her, gave her a side hug goodbye. That was the date.
So it actually wasn't a terrible date.
No, it wasn't.
It just was completely different than you ever expected.
It was completely different than ever expected. I went on a date. Here was my worst experience ever, I will say. So I showed up for chips and salsa and a margarita, and this girl walks in, and she and I had connected a little bit because I was a resident, and she was a med student at another medical school in Houston. There's like 4 med schools in Houston. And she shows up, and this one was a weight thing, like dramatically heavier than her pictures, which I was, you know what? That's fine. Like, that's not why we're connected, and that's what people do. I let it slide. I mean, I'm sure I was heavier than I probably was in my pictures. So fine. So we sit down though, and the first thing this girl does is completely like offend me. She says, well, what are you going into? And so I'm going into plastic surgery. And she looks at me, she goes, oh, what a shame. Oh. And I'm like, excuse me? She's like, I mean, yeah, like, when did you decide to give up? I'm like, what do you mean give up? She's like, I mean, most people go to doctors, most people go to med school and become doctors to save lives. And you're just going to like give it all up and help support people's vanity. Oh. And I was like, I'm sorry. I actually really like plastic surgery. What are you going into, Missy? And she says, well, obviously I'm going to be an ER doctor because I want to save lives. So at this point, I'm pissed, right? I have utmost respect for ER doctors, but at this point, I'm mad at this girl. So I look at her and say, oh, you want to be a triage nurse? And she's like, excuse me? I'm like, yeah, you want to like see people, figure out what the real problem is, and then call somebody like me who can actually fix the real problem in to do it for you.
Oh, wow.
No, not the right response. And again, listeners of the podcast, utmost respect for ER physicians. They're phenomenal physicians.
They are good doctors. They have good professions.
Good, and they do save lives. But I was angry at this girl for calling me out. And I'm literally, as I'm telling you this story, realizing where some of my like need to take away the shame of plastic surgery comes from. Was this friggin' date. And she goes off on me. She's like, you asshole. How dare you think you're better than me? And I'm like, you started it. And so I'm like, waiter comes over. I'm like, cool, gonna pay for drinks. Like, let's finish this. She orders dinner.
Oh, okay. She wants to be there longer.
She wants to be there longer. So we go through the most awkward dinner ever. Like, this is not the end of the story. She goes through this most awkward. I'm just silent. There's a little bit of like small talk. She gets free dinner out of this date. I give her this little side hug goodbye. Done. Right? Go home. End of the night. The next day, it's like 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm at my apartment, obviously alone.
Obviously.
The terrible insinuation that I was going to take a first date Tinder date home. Whatever.
After all of that, he took her home.
And I get this text from this girl, and she says, hey, how do you think the date went last night? Like, just how did it go? And I'm like, not well. You offended me right out the gates. Then I offended you. I didn't think really well. What about you? And she says, well, at least I know I'm going to get something out of this. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she says, I mean, you're a resident. I'm a med student. She's like, you know a lot of physicians, and I need some good recommendation letters for me to apply to residency. So certainly you can help me out with that.
Of course you can after all of that.
And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And she's like, are you serious? You won't help me with these letters? I said, no, you are a mean person. I'm not going to do that. And she texts me. I wish I still had this text. I was just like, damn it. I should have just slept with you. Maybe then I would have gotten somewhere.
Oh, because, that would have been exactly how to solve all of those issues.
Yeah. Worst online dating experience ever.
Winner.
But apparently, this podcast, I've every episode, I'm like, holy cow, this is therapy. Apparently helped drive my desire to take the shame out of plastic surgery.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, didn't even know that. Just figured it out now.
Well, and I would argue that plastic surgeons do save lives.
Right? Absolutely.
I mean, maybe not a life or death type of situation, but like, I would argue that they do change and enhance and make lives better. Yes. So
absolutely,
I don't see how that would not be a doctor.
To be fair, every time I operate, I tell my patient, make sure you know and are nice to the anesthesiologist because he's the only real doctor in the room.
And having surgery from you, I can attest that is true.
Yeah. Shit goes south. That's the guy or girl you want taking care of you, not me. All right. Tangent. That was our fun tangent. Okay, so back to you are not wanting it to be an online story.
So not wanting it to be an online story, turning 36. And I'm hanging out New Year's with a bunch of friends, single people. And a couple of us girls kind of were like, we're all kind of getting older. We probably need to make dating a priority. Like, it was just one of those things that it was like a harsh reality of, okay, as you get older, dating is harder. Yeah. Because when you're in your 20s, I mean, like, you can find people anywhere. You're going out more. You want to socialize. You want to do all that. So you actually like meet people. When you're in your 30s, you don't. Yeah. You become boring, like myself, and you work and then go to the gym and then you want to watch Netflix because that sounds way more entertaining than, trying to go out and socialize. So anyway, we had kind of made a pact, and it was me and a few girls. And we made a pact that basically was like, this is the year we're going to try or make it a priority to date.
Yeah.
And
like 10 years later than it would have happened in Utah.
Exactly. You know, us New Yorkers are sitting here going, you know, we're very late to the game. So now that we have learned from all of our Utah friends who have been married and have 10-year-olds, we now need to actually like join the game.
Perfect.
So so I was the only one actually of the group that had never gone online. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I was a little bit against it, but I kind of came to the harsh reality that I needed to go online because I wasn't going to meet anybody anywhere else. And so I decided to join every app that they recommended. So it was like Hinge and Bumble and Mutual and all these weird different apps that like people were throwing at my direction, and the League, because the League was like, you know, as it is pretentious, it also is like very high class in New York. And we wanted to meet like those high class people in New York, of course. And so I had to apply to be on the League.
Oh my gosh.
Which, you know, is its own little story in itself. But anyway, I joined all those apps. And within like the first day, I was like about to delete every one of them because you find yourself like overly obsessed with these people. But then you also become obsessed with like, well, am I putting the right pictures out? Am I showing the right side of me? Yeah. Am I doing this or that, whatever it is? And so I kind of had to challenge myself to, I'm going to go on at least one date a month.
Okay.
So I figured that was like an easy goal.
Yeah.
And it would be an online date, and I would just kind of put myself out there. And a lot of it was just for practice because, you know, dating is a practice thing too, you know, and you learn a lot about yourself and how you portray yourself and what you think of yourself. And not saying that it needs to be a vanity thing, but at the same time, like, you're a little bit more aware.
Yeah. Do you remember what your bio was?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, love the outdoors, like finance person in New York, like, you know, career oriented, like all that cheesy stuff that would be like not attractive for any Utah person, but like maybe a New Yorker would find it attractive. Who knows?
My very favorite bio I ever saw. This was not my bio, but it was some girl's bio that I read.
No.
And it said, "I'm like Gillette. I'm the best a man can get. Also, I will cut you."
Actually, it's pretty clever.
Incredible.
That's pretty great. Yeah. So I was not witty. So I definitely, except for I do find myself funnier online than I probably am in person. So like I did find myself like witty in like text messages. So I thought that I was okay.
Disagree. You're terrible online.
I would be absolutely terrible online.
You're hilarious in real life and online. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I think because like, I'm probably jaded in my brain that like it comes across as like, you know, I didn't want to like make fun of online dating because you've got to think like everybody moved to online dating. So sure. I didn't want to be that person that was like, oh, this is so stupid. Like, so I kind of came to the conclusion that this was the way I was going to meet somebody.
Yeah.
And to be fair, you know, even though I was living the single life and kind of loving my single life, I did want to settle down.
Yeah.
Like I did want kids. I did want to settle down. And like I said, I was getting to my late 30s. And so I knew it needed to be a priority. Mm-hmm. And so I actually met a guy it was like May timeframe. So I started online dating in January, went on a few dates, met a guy who happened to be a Utah guy in New York.
Oh, wow. So
he was visiting. Well, I didn't know because you know how online it says you're located here. So he was located in New York, but I was talking to him and looking at his profile and it's all these Utah pictures and somebody who grew up in Utah. I was like, I recognize this mountain and this and this. And so we started up a conversation. Come to find out he was visiting New York. But lived in Utah, and we met up and hit it off like right away and started dating long distance from Utah to New York, which was just random. And we met on Bumble, and it was, you know, it just seemed it kind of was like magical at first because it was like, great. Yeah. Well, you know, without sharing too much of that story, it turned out to be an absolute jerk. So that's fun. So we ended up dating until about end of September of that year.
Okay.
And he turned out to be a jerk, and I'm not going to share that story, but he essentially ditched me.
Okay.
He was supposed to come to New York, called me the night before and said, I'm not, well, okay, so let's back up that story just a minute. So I was in Chicago for work, and he knew that I was on an airplane flying back to New York. So I had arranged to come back to New York so that we could spend the weekend together.
Okay.
So he, strategically messaged me while I was on the plane, left a voicemail.
Okay.
And so I get off the plane, I look at my phone, I have a new voicemail from him, and it's him proceeding to tell me that he is not coming.
Oh boy.
And this was the day before.
Yeah.
So I had planned this really awesome weekend. We had concert tickets to Queen. We had Broadway show tickets. We had dinner reservations. We had all this stuff that I had planned because it was going to be this really romantic weekend in New York.
Yeah.
So I get crushed, right? That sucks. And you go through these mental games of, well, he sucks and he's the worst person in the world. And then on the flip sense, you say, well, what did I do? Maybe I did something. Maybe my communication skills were off or whatever. And then I'm a little bit, I don't want to say crazy because I'm not crazy, but in this situation, I got a little crazy and I was like, you know what? If you didn't come, and it was a stupid reason, right? He just wasn't going to come, then you need to pay me for half of the stuff that I bought because we had all these concert tickets and all this stuff. So I sent him a Venmo request.
I don't think that's crazy at all.
So I was just like, you owe me half of this because you didn't show up.
Yeah.
So I sent him a Venmo request and he ignored it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, long story short, I have never spoken to this guy again. We dated for 4 to 5 months, and that was the voicemail was the last I had ever heard of him.
Oh my gosh. Here's how I know you are a bigger person, though. You didn't send him 25 texts and tell him how ugly he is.
You know what? I did not do that. You're right. You're right. But I did go into a little bit of a tailspin because I was kind of like, well, maybe I was being insensitive. Maybe it was one of those things where it was something that he was going through, and I was kind of going through a little bit of that, but I didn't outwardly project that.
Sure.
Excuse me. And so because he had kind of put me through a little bit of a tailspin, it was probably 2 weeks, and it was really hard to work and focus and all of that. And I never wanted a guy to dictate my life. That was always something that was very important to me. I was an independent woman. And after the 2 weeks of just kind of going through an emotional roller coaster, and getting ditched never feels good, right? It's not good on the self-esteem at all. Yeah. So I had decided one night that the only way to get him out of my head was to go on every app that I possibly could and talk to 50 plus men. Because I just needed a distraction. I know that sounds so stupid, but it just sounds so weird. But I had to make sure that I could just have my focus be somewhere completely different.
Okay.
So here I am swiping, and I'm swiping on everybody. And I didn't want to go on dates. I just wanted a million conversations. Yeah. Because nothing makes you feel better than somebody being like, oh, you're so pretty, or you're so this or that, or.
Oh, that's why online dating is so popular. I think it's such
you get constant compliments.
Constant validation. It is constant validation from people who really just want to hook up with you.
Definitely.
And if you've got one dopamine hit from one person wanting to hook up with you, how great is it to have 50 people messaging you the same thing?
Oh, yeah. And you feel so good when you're constantly getting messaged. Yeah. And it's all these men or women or whoever that are just telling you you're so pretty. Obviously, the insults come after the fact. I feel like your first impressions are usually positive.
For sure.
And so that's what my goal was, is just to, build up my self-esteem by talking to a million people.
Okay. Do
it. So that brings me to John. So John is my current husband. And John is from Australia, like we said at the beginning. And all of a sudden, like, I didn't know how these online dating profiles worked or anything, or like the filters or anything, because like I said, my goal was to talk to as many people as I possibly could. So he comes up. So you
set your range to world.
So my range was world. And so and it's funny because I didn't realize that, but I must have sent some kind of range a little bit bigger than New York City. So John pops up and he's very attractive.
He is. He's a good looking dude.
He's very good looking. I'm biased, but he's very, very good looking.
I'm a plastic surgeon. I can say it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Mark my words, plastic surgeon said
it's true, John.
He's very attractive. So he's a very attractive guy. So he pops up on my screen and I see that he's in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
And I was very confused because I was like, Sydney, Australia, like, could you get any further? Like, I don't think you could get any further than this. And so I was like going through his profile and I was like, well, he checks every box that I'd ever want, except for the fact that he lives on the other side of the world. And so I was like, well, who cares? Like, I'll just swipe whatever it was, right, left, whatever it is. So I liked him. We matched. And then I was also surprised because I was like, we matched? Like, the Sydney guy matched with me? Mm-hmm. And so then I was like, well, I'm not going to reach out because, like, I mean, here's my like crazy side going, well, if he wants to talk to me on the other side of the world, then he can reach out to me.
Yeah.
So he did. He reached out to me and I just remember being very surprised about it. And so I responded back to him and he was very engaging.
Yeah.
He was actually asking me questions. He was trying to create a conversation. And you know, probably within like a couple of days of talking with him, I started to like, you know, dismiss all these other guys because they weren't as interesting as John. Like John was definitely somebody that, you know, caught my attention. And then I also remember, and this is like so sad to say because I ended up with John, but I was like, he's the perfect distraction. Because he's so funny and he's super witty and he's really smart and he's got 1 million degrees. And so like he could hold conversation very well, but he was also on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So I could live my life, but then still have this like online romance, you know, on the side or like getting to know this person. And so it was kind of like the best scenario because I wasn't ready to kind of just jump right back into dating.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like a part of me would have been more scared off if we started going on dates.
Okay.
But instead we just had the conversations going. So about 3 weeks into just chatting with him a few times a day, whatever it was, I wanted to stalk him online.
Naturally, as you do.
So, you know, you have the 6 photos that you get. And I figured I don't really actually know this person until I can kind of stalk him online.
Yeah.
And so I asked him if he had a social media account. And he's like, I have a really old Facebook account.
Okay.
I was like, that'll work.
Red flag.
Red flag. But I was like, that'll work. Facebook, we got this. So I friended him on Facebook and we had a mutual friend.
Okay.
So bizarre. Like, how do you have a mutual friend with somebody on the other side of the world? Well, this mutual friend of ours, she was a roommate of mine in New York when I first moved there. So I moved there in 2006 and we were roommates. So that's what every 22-year-old does when they move to a big city and you're single and you're poor.
Yeah.
You bunk up with, you know, other women. Sounds weird, but that's what you do. So this girl was my roommate and we were really good friends, but she was a performer. She traveled all over the world. And so if there was anybody that could have been a mutual friend, she probably would have been the best candidate.
Sure.
But I'm still really good friends with her. So I immediately called her and I said, that's where your screening comes in, where you can kind of say, oh, well, if it's a friend of a friend, then at least you can like screen this person out. So I call her up and I say, hey, how do you know John? And she was like, oh, I dated his best friend, you know, years ago. He is the coolest guy. And so then it kind of gave me more validation because I was like, oh, he's actually cool. Somebody actually like who I know validated that he was a good guy.
Yeah.
And so Anyway, she kind of gave me the red light or the green light to kind of say, maybe you should try to meet him. So that was, November, December timeframe. And, we started talking a little bit more. We started FaceTime. We started audio messaging a little bit just to kind of get to know each other. And by January-ish timeframe, we decided if we're gonna see if there's anything here, we need to meet. And my whole idea was, well, I don't want to go to Sydney because I've already been to Sydney. I don't want to fly 24 plus hours to go to a city I've already been where you're going to be working and I'm just going to be touring around because I covet my vacation time. Like, I want to make sure that my vacation time is like true vacation time. And then I said, on the flip side, I don't want you coming to New York and flying all this way and I'm working and doing all this. And I just kind of threw it out there. I was like, we should just meet in the middle.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. Yeah. And he's like, okay, where's middle? And so we were talking on the phone and I was like, how about we go to Hawaii?
Perfect.
So here we are, never met each other, talking for a few months.
Great first date.
We decide that our first date was going to be 7 days in Hawaii, in the island of Kauai, which is like the romantic island.
Yeah. You realize how south this could have gone.
Well, you do realize that's how people get murdered too, right?
That's the extreme south.
That's the extreme side. But it was also one of those things where it was like, well, we got to take a chance. And so I figured, one, I felt like I had talked to him enough that he wasn't going to murder me. Like, that's one thing. But I also had a friend that vouched for him.
Okay.
So that helped me feel somewhat comfortable that he wasn't, at worst, he was just going to be like a crazy person that I didn't like.
See, I'm super cynical. I'm still not convinced he's not going to murder you.
Well, I mean, it's how long now, and he hasn't yet. So that's a positive.
Yeah, my hope's coming up.
Or that he just wanted a green card, because that was the other thing I'd get from friends. Like, oh, well, are you sure he's just not using you for a green card? But if you know John, you'll realize he doesn't even want to be American citizen. No. So he is not using me for a green card.
Back in the outback.
Yeah, he would move back to Sydney in a heartbeat. So anyway, so we did that. So I did, as any smart woman would do, I told a bunch of people where I was going. Yes. I had to check in on Instagram every day so that people knew I was alive. And then I also planned something super fun every day. So I was like, if you suck, I'm still going to have a fun trip. Like, that's kind of how I looked at it. Like I said, I covet my vacation time.
Absolutely.
So I was going to have a good trip regardless. And neither one of us had gone to Kauai. So it was like, okay, it's new for both of us. So we went to Kauai in March of 2020, right before the world shut down. So we were in Hawaii when COVID hit and everything shut down.
I saw you right before you left in New York.
You saw me right before I left in New York. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So that could have been the last time you saw me. That was a very precious visit.
Yeah. In fact, I was in New York with my daughter, Isabel, for her birthday. And we went to see a show for her birthday. And you and I met with her at Jacob's Pickle.
That's right.
Yeah. So we had brunch at Jacob's Pickle, a phenomenal restaurant. And all of the COVID stuff was just starting to come out. And we even had a conversation where we were like, can you imagine if this shit hits New York? Like,
that's exactly our conversation.
It'll spread like wildfire. When Isabel and I left, like a day or two later was the first confirmed case.
Yeah. And then I think I left a couple days later.
Yeah.
Because they had the first case in like New Rochelle, so it wasn't quite the city.
Yeah, and they didn't shut things down for a little bit.
Exactly.
After the first couple cases.
They shut it down while I was in Hawaii.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you're in Hawaii.
So we're in Hawaii. We meet this guy, and this podcast would be 2 hours long if I told you all the details of that trip. But, nothing is more awkward than meeting somebody for the first time in the Honolulu airport, waiting for our connecting flight to Kauai. But, there's all these funny things that go on, and you can kind of shift it over to the plastic surgery side because it's all very vain online in the sense that how tall are they? How, are they big? Are they actually, do they look like they're pictures or whatever it is? And luckily I had FaceTime John, so I kind of knew a little bit about what he looked like.
Yeah.
But one of the things I didn't know is how short he was.
Oh, really?
I had no idea. Well, how tall or short. He's not short. So I didn't know.
You just didn't know his height.
I didn't know his height.
Okay.
So I kept asking him in a very roundabout way. And I would be like, so we're going to go scuba diving. I need your height. And
because you're not short. How tall are you?
I'm not short. I'm 5'7".
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of guys that are 5, and there's nothing wrong with being short. I just want to just put that out there. It's just for me, being a tall woman, you kind of want somebody taller than you. At least that's the preference.
Sure.
So he kept telling me he was 180 centimeters. Well, nobody's 180 centimeters. You're either 179 centimeters or you're 181 centimeters, but you're not 180. That's too even.
I don't even know what 180 centimeters calculates.
170, yeah. So 180 centimeters is roughly 5'10", 5'11".
Been married to this guy for a year and you're already talking metric system.
Well, so he was telling me this, and of course I'm going to the internet being like, how tall are you? And so, like I said, no one's 180 centimeters. Like, you're going to be some variation of that. Like, guys love to round up.
Oh my gosh.
So that's about 5'10", 5'11", I would say. And I'm saying, okay, well, if he's rounding up, that means he's probably 5'9", 5'8", 5'9". So I do want to share this part of the story because I find it really funny.
Okay.
So I get to the Honolulu airport. He had flown in 3 hours before me from Sydney. So he is already there. And obviously you go to the bathroom, you fix yourself up, you go over and you're walking to the gate. And I walk up to the gate, and he had texted me and he said, hey, I'm trying to change our seats so that we can sit next to each other. So I walk up and there's this guy, and, there's nothing wrong with any kind of fashion sense that people want to choose to wear.
Sure.
But if I had to describe him, which I can't remember too much, but he was probably wearing socks and sandals. Like, he probably had his socks, mid-thigh or mid-calf, sandals on. He had like shorts that were below the knee. And
that's how I travel.
Just to clarify, this is not John, but I didn't know because this is the first time I'm meeting this guy and I'm seeing the back of this guy. Yeah. And he's got this really long hair and a hat on. And I kid you not, I text John and this guy looks at his phone. And the important part of this is this guy was like 5'4".
Okay.
So really small.
Not 180 centimeters.
Not 180 centimeters. And so as soon as I text John, who I thought was John, he looks at his phone and my heart just sank. I was like, oh no, just the style was going to be off. Everything's just... So, and that's, you're going into uncharted territory at that point. Yeah. So you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, rest assured. So I kind of positioned myself in a very good seat where when he turned around, I could see him and then I'd be nice and we'd have this great week trip of friendship. Sure. And that's it. And so luckily I sit down and I'm trying to see what this guy's face is. And then John texts me and he's like, oh, I'm not actually at the gate. I'm actually, down at the check-in. Oh. And so then I was like, oh, thank goodness. So that was actually my first scary moment of what did I do? I flew all the way to Hawaii and here I am with a guy that's 5'4", which is not a problem, but just seemed odd. Yeah. And then when John came up, it was a pleasant surprise because he's very attractive, fit, not short. And so that kind of started off the week. So the week was good. Pandemic hit. Obviously, I said this podcast would be 2 hours if I went into the details, so I'll spare those details. And
it's only taken us 45 minutes to get to the point that
oh my gosh,
that we started, which was
oh my gosh. Of course, you bring me on this show.
You met John during the pandemic.
Okay. So let me speed this up a little bit.
No,
I was like, let me speed this up because this is probably so boring for people.
A phenomenal conversation.
So anyway, we kind of ignored the pandemic. Like I work in finance, so I knew the market was tanking. I was actually investing every day, which was smart in hindsight, but that was the most I knew of what was going on with the pandemic, because here we are in Hawaii in our own little, world. Nothing was closed down. We still had all of our tours. We were having this great time. It was, kind of a love at first sight in some ways, which is really cheesy to say, but it was a little bit like that. You could have blamed Hawaii. So at the end of the trip, John, flew back to Sydney. Our goal was to have him come to New York for the month of May. I was going to go to Sydney for, sometime during the summertime. He flies back to Sydney. I have my mom calling me nonstop about how I can't go back to New York because everything's like getting destroyed there. And if I fly back into New York, I'll never get out.
Oh my gosh.
And so she had convinced me to fly to Utah. Mm-hmm. And so then I fly from Kauai to Utah and ended up living in Utah for the next year and a half.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you guys have said, we're in love. We want to figure this out.
Actually, no. Like when we left, so John had asked me to be his girlfriend. Let's say, so we were leaving on the Saturday. He had asked me to be his girlfriend on Wednesday. And I said no.
On the trip?
On the trip.
Okay.
He goes, I'd really like you, like maybe we should just try dating each other. And I was like, I'm going to turn 37 in a couple months and I can't take myself off the market and to date somebody on the other side of the world. I mean, it's just so funny in hindsight, but like, I was just like, I just don't think I could take myself off the market at this point. I'm trying to make dating a priority. Yeah. And John, sweet John, he's like, it's fine. It's fine. And then by Friday, he was like, I don't want you dating anybody else. Like, we just needed to make this work. And that's when he was like, I'll come to New York in May. Like, we'll make this work. So I had agreed to be his girlfriend at the tail end of the trip. And I wouldn't say that we were in love. We liked each other. Yeah. We thought that, there was potential. We got along. And I would actually say that the pandemic probably brought us closer. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that was because neither one of us could socialize. Yeah. So there was no jealousy factor. I knew he was sitting at home. I was sitting at home. There's nothing else we could do. And so the other thing is we both were working from home. So with the time difference, we were able to have more conversations. And so we probably got to know each other more. And at the start, it was really ridiculous because we were having like 8 to 10 hour conversations, which is just crazy.
How long did you go before you saw him again?
It was a year and a half.
Oh my gosh.
It was a year and a half. So John, so we had decided, and this was like months into it, like 6 months after we met in Hawaii, that we needed to start applying for the visa. Uh-huh. And it wasn't to get married. Uh-huh. But it was because we didn't know how long the pandemic was going to last. Yeah. And so the only visa that made sense was the K1, which is 90-day fiance. Okay. Which we kind of figured like, okay, online dating, we did meet in person. We knew that there was like the physical aspect was there. We knew that we liked each other. We got to know each other, on the phone. And so we kind of were looking at it like if we dated for 90 days, we'd probably like in person, we would know if we wanted to be married or not. Yeah. And so that's kind of what our rationale was. Plus the K1 visa was the easiest visa to apply for in our scenario. Okay. So we got issued the K1 visa a year and a half later. Okay. So here's us dating online for a year and a half. He gets the visa in July of 2021 and moves to New York September of 2021. Okay. We move in together because we figured if you're going to get to know somebody in 90 days, the best way to do it is to live together. Yeah. So we moved in together. It was a rocky first month.
This is what, second time you've ever
This is the second time that we've ever seen each other in person. We have officially moved in together. And I would say the first month was rough. Yeah. It was. Because but like every first time moving in with somebody is going to be rough.
Oh yeah.
Like that's just how it is, I think. But I think that was the growing pains. We had to, like, thankfully we were living together so we could work out a lot of things. So we had a really rough first month, and then we started to figure each other out. And a lot of that was because we were both walking on eggshells. Mm-hmm. We were both trying to make this work, but at the same time we were trying to act like we were comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so the first month was crazy. We worked it out. And then, a long story long, we got married in November of 2021. And then we decided that we actually wanted to like have a proper wedding. Mm-hmm. And so we planned a proper wedding right during Omicron. Yeah. So, that's also fun. Yeah. So we had our actual official wedding in January of this year.
So that first one, that was to be able to fulfill the K-1 visa.
That was just to fulfill the K-1 visa. So it was just immediate family. We didn't tell anybody else that we were getting married. Yeah. It was really just in front of our family. Yeah. That was all that could come. John's family was on Zoom. So that was really what it was. And it was literally to seal the deal, to sign the papers, to make it legal so he could stay past the 90 days. Yeah.
So you guys have now been married, I guess, since November, almost a year.
So we've almost been married a year, and surprise, we got pregnant right away, which now we're expecting our first child. So we are trying to do everything we possibly can in the first year of marriage.
And correct me, he can't leave the country yet, right?
He just got issued his green card last month.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Congrats, yeah. John. We thought it was going to take a long time.
We thought it was going to take 2 years. We thought it was going to take, we thought he could get a work permit so he could, stay and work, but he must be a very low risk, person coming from Australia rather than the Middle East or somewhere else. So they issued him his green card in July.
And you probably still haven't met in person his family.
So I have not. Surprise, you have to keep me. I am carrying his child. Yeah. So I've met his brother. I've met some uncles. Mm-hmm. I've met some cousins. Mm-hmm. They have come over. I have not met his parents. Okay. His parents are coming over for Christmas. So that'll be the first time I get to meet them.
New York or Utah?
They're going to go to New York.
Nice.
Yeah. So we're going to spend Christmas in New York this year. So, yeah. I walked in your son. Sorry.
Sorry, here I am.
Here it is. You're going to have to like me now.
How can you not think that that's an interesting story to come on this podcast and share? It's a wild story.
It's a wild story, and it could have gone so many directions.
Oh, for sure.
And it could have ended so badly. And it's hard to say like, oh, you should do something similar, because I would say that 99% of the time you're going to end up with a crazy person. And I wouldn't necessarily, like, I'm pregnant with a girl. There's no possible way she'd be going to Hawaii to meet a guy. Like, there's no way. Unless she's 36. And I was like, well, at 36, you can do whatever you want.
She's 36 and has her life put together like you did.
Yeah, like, then fine. You can potentially go get murdered. But at that, like, before that time, I was like, that's just crazy. So I realized my story is unique, and I realized that it could have ended badly, but it actually ended really well. And John's great. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. We love him.
Yeah,
he's became a part of the family very, very quickly, and it's a beautiful story.
So it's a crazy one, but there you go.
Yeah,
there's hope for everybody out there.
We even talked a little bit about plastic surgery.
Yeah, well, we haven't mentioned too much about plastic surgery, but
we talked a little bit. But I will say, you are at least a candidate for the show because you've had a very small amount of plastic surgery from me, which is just some mole removals. And you do a lot of non-surgical stuff, though. You're one of my biggest sibling supporters of my med spa.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is
anytime I can come to Utah, I go to the med spa. Yeah, Plus, I love everybody there.
Yeah, I think Clarity Skin, I think they probably think I have like one sister. Because anytime they're like, oh, your sister came in, it's you.
It's me.
Which, speaking of like other sisters, like, go use the spa. Like,
hey, I'm a big fan of it. I love everybody that works there. I mean, that's one of the things that I like to go and just socialize and talk to everybody. But Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Clarity.
Good. Clarity Skin is the med spa. So we're going to wrap up a little bit here. Before we wrap up, is there anything you want to promote or share, or I don't know. I mean, you're a financial advisor for a hedge fund.
I work for a hedge fund, so if you have more than $1 million and you want to invest in a fund, then definitely call me.
If you are an angel investor listening to this podcast, Bryndee is your gal.
We have a great return policy, so there you go.
Thanks so much. That was fun.
That was so fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to The Naked Patient Beyond the Operating Room. I'm Dr. Nicholas Howland. Please remember that every patient who appears on this podcast has consented to discuss their story and their surgery on the podcast. That way we remain HIPAA compliant. This is a free podcast. The best thing that you can do for us is to leave us a review online. Let us know what you liked. Let us know what you'd like to hear. Let us know how we can improve. If you are curious about anything related to plastic surgery, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Dr. Nicholas Howland, and I typically respond there, or you can reach us at the office at 801-571-2020, or we have an online form you can fill out at the website, www.howlandplasticsurgery.com. Any of our coordinators would be happy to help you. Thanks again for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Naked Patient Podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode. Till next time.